Chicago looked beautiful from a distance. Rain polished the city into something elegant, turning skyscraper windows into rivers of silver light and empty sidewalks into mirrors reflecting the restless glow of passing traffic. But beauty had a way of hiding danger beneath its surface. Madeline Cross understood that better than most. At 27, she spent her professional life helping traumatized people untangle their fears. As a trauma counselor, she guided survivors through panic attacks, grief, betrayal, and the invisible wounds left behind by people they once trusted. She knew the language of fear. She knew how survival rewired the brain. She knew why victims blamed themselves for staying. What she never expected was becoming one of them. To the outside world, Ethan Mercer was perfection. Wealthy, educated, generous at charity galas. The kind of man who remembered birthdays, donated to children's hospitals, and shook hands with politicians beneath camera flashes. People admired him. Women envied her. Only Madeline knew the truth hidden beneath polished smiles. Control had arrived disguised as devotion. He tracked her location under the pretense of safety, managed her finances under the excuse of partnership, corrected her clothing choices because he wanted to protect her image, isolated her from friends because loyalty mattered more than outside opinions. Little by little, her world narrowed until Ethan became the center of her entire universe. The frightening part wasn't how obvious it became. It was how gradual it had been. Fear didn't announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrived as a whisper. By the time Madeline recognized the emotional prison surrounding her, she barely recognized herself. The woman who once laughed freely now measured every word. Her heart pounded at unexpected phone notifications. Her breathing shifted whenever keys rattled against apartment doors. Even silence carried danger. She wasn't physically trapped. Yet she had forgotten what freedom felt like. Then one sleepless night, something inside her changed. She was not a victim. She became powerful. While Ethan attended a business conference in Seattle, Madeline packed a single suitcase. She withdrew small amounts of cash he'd never noticed missing. She left behind expensive jewelry, designer handbags, and photographs documenting a life built on appearances. She abandoned everything except the fragments of herself still worth saving. The tiny studio apartment she rented on Chicago's North Side felt nothing like the luxury condominium she had escaped. Its kitchen barely accommodated two people. The radiator clicked through cold nights. The windows overlooked narrow brick alleys instead of city skylines. But it was hers. For the first time in years, the silence belonged to her. Still, safety remained fragile. Empty subway rides became exercises in vigilance. Every stranger lingering too long made her pulse accelerate. Every unknown number on her replacement phone tightened something inside her chest. Rain-soaked evenings transformed into rituals of checking locks twice before attempting sleep. Hunted people learned routines differently. Fear sharpened instincts. Trauma remembered details the conscious mind desperately wanted to forget. Weeks passed. Then months. Madeline rebuilt herself slowly through quiet victories. Grocery shopping without permission. Reading novels before bed. Drinking coffee while watching storms move across Chicago rooftops. Breathing deeply without waiting for criticism to follow. Hope returned cautiously. Perhaps Ethan had finally moved on. Perhaps distance had weakened his need for control. Perhaps escaping had worked. Then the invitation arrived. An elite fundraising gala supporting mental health initiatives. Attendance from Chicago's wealthiest families. Important donors. Career opportunities impossible to ignore. Madeline hesitated. Fear whispered warnings. But another voice whispered louder. She had survived. She refused to let trauma dictate the boundaries of her future. Dressed in understated elegance beneath crystal chandeliers and surrounded by Chicago's powerful elite, Madeline crossed the ballroom threshold believing she had finally reclaimed ownership of her life. Then her breath caught. Across the crowded gala, standing beneath golden light with effortless charm carved across his familiar face, Ethan Mercer slowly turned toward her. And smiled. The grand ballroom of the Blackstone Hotel shimmered beneath towering crystal chandeliers, its polished floors reflecting the wealth and power gathered beneath its historic ceilings. Chicago's elite moved effortlessly through the crowd wrapped in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, exchanging practiced smiles beneath the elegant notes of a live string quartet. Expensive whiskey lingered in the air alongside the scent of expensive cologne, creating an atmosphere of sophistication so convincing that it disguised the quiet dangers hidden among its guests. Madeline Cross stood frozen near the entrance. Her breath shortened. Her heart pounded. Across the ballroom, Ethan Mercer had seen her. At first glance, his expression mirrored surprise. Then recognition sharpened into something colder. The polished charm admired by everyone around him remained perfectly intact, yet Madeline recognized the subtle shift instantly. The slight tightening around his jaw. The focused intensity in his eyes. The calculated patience of someone who had never accepted losing control. Fear whispered through her bloodstream. Run. She lowered her gaze and turned toward the crowded dance floor, weaving carefully between laughing donors and influential businessmen discussing charity initiatives. She tried convincing herself she was imagining things. That perhaps Ethan would preserve appearances. Then she heard his voice drift behind her. Soft. Controlled. Close. Her survival instincts erupted. The elegant ballroom transformed into a maze. People continued sipping champagne while Madeline navigated through clusters of guests who failed to notice her trembling hands. A woman complimented another guest's diamond necklace. Investors debated political campaigns. Somewhere nearby, laughter echoed beneath the orchestra's melody. Nobody noticed the hunted woman trying not to panic. Nobody saw danger approaching. Because monsters rarely looked monstrous. Ethan moved through the crowd with patient determination. He never raised his voice. Never caused a scene. His pursuit appeared almost affectionate to outsiders. Madeline knew better. Every step behind her felt like betrayal from a world unwilling to recognize hidden fear. She wasn't weak. She wasn't helpless. She was not a victim. She became powerful the moment she chose escape. But trauma remembered. It remembered whispers disguised as concern. It remembered breath held during arguments. It remembered how control could wear a beautiful smile. Heart pounding violently, Madeline pushed through a velvet corridor branching away from the ballroom. She barely noticed the gold plaques warning private access only. Security personnel stationed nearby had momentarily shifted their attention toward arriving dignitaries. Desperation overruled caution. She slipped past them. The atmosphere changed immediately. The vibrant energy of the gala faded into hushed sophistication. Velvet lounges replaced crowded dance floors. Crystal decanters reflected dim amber lighting. Men in immaculate suits conducted quiet conversations over aged whiskey and unspoken alliances. The silence carried weight. Power lived here. Real power. Madeline stopped abruptly. Someone stood directly in her path. She collided against a solid chest before stumbling backward. Strong hands steadied her instantly. The man towering before her possessed an unsettling stillness. At 35, Damien Russo looked less like a businessman and more like the embodiment of controlled danger. His charcoal suit fit with effortless precision. Dark eyes observed everything without revealing anything. His presence dominated the room without demanding attention. Kings rarely announced themselves. Empires moved through whispers. Madeline instinctively stepped away. Then Ethan appeared at the entrance of the VIP lounge. Relief crossed his face for precisely half a second before irritation replaced it. "There you are," he said smoothly, ignoring the security detail watching carefully nearby. "Madeline's overwhelmed. I'll take her home." Damien's gaze shifted between them. He noticed Ethan's measured confidence. He noticed Madeline's silence. More importantly, he noticed the details others overlooked. The slight tremor in her fingers. The controlled breathing of someone suppressing panic. The way she positioned herself near exits. The instinctive flinch whenever Ethan moved closer. Survival behaviors. Emotionally scarred behaviors. Behaviors Damien knew didn't lie. A dangerous quiet settled across the lounge. Ethan maintained his polished smile, but impatience surfaced beneath it. He expected cooperation. Expected influence to smooth complications aside. Instead, Damien remained seated. Unmoved. Fear met power. Control met something stronger. The head of the Russo syndicate regarded Madeline thoughtfully before returning his attention toward Ethan. His refusal came without raised voices. Without threats. Without explanation. It arrived through absolute certainty. The room itself seemed to shift around him. Because protectors did not always appear gentle. Sometimes shields looked frightening. Sometimes danger stood between a woman and something worse. Madeline couldn't understand why Damien intervened. What had he seen? Why did this feared king of Chicago's hidden empire care whether she stayed or left? The answer arrived moments later. Damien leaned closer, his voice dropping into a low whisper meant only for her ears. "You escaped one predator tonight, Madeline?" His dark eyes held hers. "Unfortunately." His pause stole her breath. "You just chose another." Chicago disappeared beneath layers of rain and midnight shadows as Madeline Cross sat silently in the backseat of a black luxury sedan, watching familiar streets fade into unfamiliar territory. The city she had fought so hard to reclaim no longer felt like home. Fear had a way of changing landscapes. Every passing intersection looked like a potential trap. Every reflection in rain-streaked windows carried the possibility of Ethan Mercer appearing once again with that devastating smile that had nearly destroyed her. Across from her sat Damien Russo. He hadn't pressured her into conversation. He hadn't demanded trust. He simply occupied the silence with an unsettling calm that somehow made the chaos inside her breathe a little slower. The king of Chicago's hidden empire did not offer false reassurance. He offered certainty. Nearly 40 minutes later, the elevator doors opened directly into another world. The penthouse stretched high above the city skyline like a fortress suspended among clouds. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering expanse of Chicago beneath storm-dark skies. Italian marble reflected soft amber lighting. Quiet libraries lined with leather-bound books replaced the cold intimidation Madeline had expected from a man like Damien Russo. No loud displays of wealth. No trophies celebrating power. Only elegance, control, discipline, safe. The realization unsettled her more than fear itself. Two women greeted her near the entrance. One introduced herself as Dr. Evelyn Grant, a trauma specialist. The other, Sophia Bennett, served as both nurse and wellness coordinator. Neither asked invasive questions. Neither treated her like a fragile object. Instead, they respected boundaries. Trauma-informed care. Choice. Patience. Madeline noticed the difference immediately. Her body, conditioned by years of surviving control disguised as love, remained tense. People who wanted something often moved quickly. Demanded gratitude. Expected loyalty. Damien did none of those things. The panic room is here if you need it, Sophia explained softly while guiding Madeline through the penthouse. The reinforced sanctuary looked surprisingly peaceful. Plush seating replaced sterile practicality. Emergency supplies rested neatly behind hidden panels. Soft lighting created comfort rather than confinement. A safe place. Madeline's chest tightened unexpectedly. Safe places had once been fairy tales she offered clients during therapy sessions. She had stopped believing in them herself. Later that evening, Damien found her standing near the library windows overlooking the sleeping city. Chicago glittered beneath them. Close enough to touch. Far enough to escape. You should understand the rules, he said quietly. Madeline turned toward him cautiously. There will be no forced intimacy. His voice remained steady. No confinement. He met her guarded gaze. You are free to leave whenever you choose. Heart pounding, Madeline searched his expression for hidden conditions. Manipulation. Control. Ownership. She found none. Protection only. Those two words lingered between them. Protection. Not possession. The distinction mattered. Still, distrust refused to loosen its grip entirely. Emotionally controlled women learned caution through repetition. She noticed how Damien maintained distance during conversations. How he never blocked exits. How he knocked before entering shared spaces. How female staff handled sensitive matters without his involvement. His patience became impossible to ignore. Morning arrived wrapped in pale sunlight pouring across marble floors. Madeline discovered Damien seated alone near the kitchen windows, reading reports while untouched coffee cooled beside him. There was no entourage. No performance. Only quiet rituals. He noticed her presence. A fresh cup of coffee appeared beside the empty seat opposite him. No invitation. No pressure. Just consideration. Days passed inside the dangerous empire. Madeline explored libraries overlooking breathtaking skylines. Read novels she had abandoned years earlier. Slept through entire nights without checking locks repeatedly. Her breath steadied. Her shoulders relaxed. The hunted woman remembered fragments of peace. Yet internal conflict remained. Who was Damien Russo beneath the immaculate restraint? The feared protector. The dangerous king. The man capable of building sanctuaries within empires founded on secrets. Why protect her? What had he seen in one terrified woman running through a ballroom? Elsewhere inside the penthouse, Damien's investigation deepened. Private investigators uncovered inconsistencies surrounding Ethan Mercer. Financial records. Connections hidden beneath legitimate businesses. Unusual communications disappearing behind encrypted channels. Ethan's obsession exceeded heartbreak. This was strategy. Power. Loyalty to something larger. Hours later, Damien stood alone inside his private office overlooking Chicago's skyline. The final report rested open before him. His expression darkened for the first time since Madeline entered his world. Ethan Mercer had never acted alone. Someone far more powerful had been helping him hunt her. Someone connected to an empire capable of starting wars and whispers. Someone wanted Madeline Cross back. And Damien Russo suddenly understood. Protecting her had just become far more dangerous. The illusion of safety shattered 3 nights later. Chicago's skyline still glowed beyond the penthouse windows, elegant and distant beneath sheets of rain, but deep inside Damien Russo's empire, hidden beneath polished marble and quiet libraries, another world had awakened. A world built on surveillance, secrets, whispers, war. Madeline stood outside Damien's private office as muted voices drifted through partially closed doors. She hadn't intended to overhear anything. Sleep had become easier inside the penthouse, but years of trauma had sharpened her instincts toward changes in atmosphere. And something had changed. The tension inside Damien's empire felt heavier. Close. Dangerously close. Downstairs, Damien's surveillance room resembled a command center rather than the headquarters of a businessman. Massive digital screens illuminated darkened walls. Rain-soaked alleyways flickered across monitors. Armored SUVs moved through Chicago streets under coded instructions. Men dressed in tailored suits studied encrypted reports with quiet urgency. This wasn't merely protection. It was preparation. Damien studied photographs spread across a conference table while his investigators delivered their findings. The truth arrived piece by piece. Ethan Mercer had never been acting independently. His polished image as a wealthy investor concealed deeper loyalties. Financial records linked him to shell corporations owned by rival syndicates operating beneath Chicago's legitimate business landscape. Donations made through charitable foundations masked money laundering operations stretching across multiple states. More disturbingly, Ethan's obsession with Madeline had never been purely personal. She possessed something valuable, something powerful, something dangerous. Damien reviewed files taken from Madeline's former counseling practice. As a trauma counselor, Madeline had specialized in executive burnout, high-profile family disputes, and confidential recovery programs. Years of carefully documented case notes revealed patterns she had never noticed while helping vulnerable clients heal. Powerful executives, political families, corporate heirs, elite social circles. Many connected unknowingly through the same hidden network. The same empire. The same syndicates. Madeline hadn't participated in criminal activity. She had witnessed it. Therapy sessions had exposed fragments of whispered confessions disguised as emotional breakthroughs. Clients discussed unexplained financial anxieties, fears surrounding family businesses, pressure from invisible benefactors. She had documented everything professionally. Without realizing she held evidence capable of dismantling empires. The hunted woman had become the key. Above them all, Madeline's breath caught as understanding settled heavily into her chest. This was her fault. Fear tightened around her ribs. If she had never accepted those clients, if she had recognized warning signs sooner, if she had disappeared more carefully, none of this would have happened. People were risking themselves because of her. She wasn't simply hiding from Ethan anymore. Entire syndicates wanted what existed inside locked filing systems and encrypted records tied to her professional archives. Heart pounding, Madeline retreated quietly from the office corridor. Guilt whispered cruel promises. Live. Run. Protect them. She remembered Damien's patience. His rules. No confinement. Protection only. Yet emotionally scarred survivors often mistook sacrifice for strength. She convinced herself leaving was the answer. She was not a victim. She became powerful. Power meant making impossible choices. Before sunrise painted Chicago silver, Madeline packed lightly. The skyline beyond the penthouse looked peaceful as she slipped through private hallways and service elevators Damien had never forbidden her to use. Security remained focused elsewhere as armored SUVs departed into rain-covered streets. Nobody stopped her. The Queen walked away from the King's empire believing escape would save everyone involved. Outside, Chicago greeted her with cold rain and empty sidewalks glistening beneath neon reflections. Freedom felt terrifying. Every passing stranger triggered instinctive caution. Every approaching vehicle accelerated her pulse. She moved through rainy alleys and crowded transit stations trying to disappear once more. But fear had evolved. Because this time she wasn't escaping one monster. She was escaping an invisible war. Hours passed. Exhaustion settled beneath her skin. Then it happened. A familiar voice called her name from somewhere behind. Madeline froze. Heart pounding. Breath catching. She turned instinctively toward the sound. The city around her suddenly felt wrong. Too quiet. Too controlled. Dark SUVs waited near opposite intersections. Strangers exchanged subtle glances. For the first time since leaving Damien Rousseau's penthouse, true understanding crashed through her. She had never been running toward freedom. She had stepped directly into the hands of people who had been hunting her all along. And before Madeline Cross could react, the woman who escaped one nightmare disappeared into another. The call came just after midnight. Damien Rousseau listened in complete silence as the final details unfolded through encrypted channels. Madeline Cross had disappeared somewhere between two rain-soaked intersections in downtown Chicago. Surveillance cameras had gone dark at precisely the wrong moment. Witnesses remembered nothing useful. Her phone signal had vanished into static. For the first time since Madeline entered his empire, Damien felt something dangerously unfamiliar tighten inside his chest. Fear. The room around him fell silent. Men who had spent years serving the Rousseau syndicate watched their king carefully. Damien's control had always been legendary. He negotiated wars with calm precision. He built empires through strategy rather than impulse. Tonight, diplomacy died. Chicago changed overnight. Armored SUVs moved through empty streets beneath relentless rain. Surveillance rooms glowed with endless streams of footage. Every warehouse tied to rival interests came under scrutiny. Every trusted alliance was tested. Loyalty mattered. Betrayal carried consequences. Whispers spread quickly through the underground. The king was hunting. Inside Damien's private office, reports covered polished mahogany surfaces. His expression never shifted, yet everyone sensed the storm beneath the stillness. Madeline mattered. The realization unsettled even him. At first she had been a responsibility. A woman running from danger. A wounded stranger seeking shelter. Somewhere between shared silences, untouched morning coffee rituals, and quiet conversations overlooking Chicago's skyline, something had changed. The hunted woman had become important. Close. Too close. His empire noticed it before he admitted it to himself. A trusted advisor finally asked the question no one else dared voice. Why her? Damien stared toward the rain-streaked windows overlooking the city he controlled. Because when Madeline entered his world, she hadn't looked at him like a king. She looked at him like a man deciding what kind of monster he wished to become. Meanwhile, miles away, Madeline sat in elegant captivity. The room designed to hold her looked more like an expensive hotel suite than a prison. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked dark industrial docks. Designer furniture softened the atmosphere. Warm lighting disguised danger. Still, fear lingered beneath appearances. The people surrounding her wanted information. Records. Connections. Evidence she never realized she possessed. Their questions arrived politely. Their smiles remained composed. Control disguised itself beautifully. Heart pounding, Madeline wrapped trembling fingers around untouched tea. She remembered Damien's rules. No forced intimacy. No confinement. Protection only. At the time she'd questioned his intentions. Now she understood something terrifying. Safety had never been the absence of danger. Safety had been Damien standing between her and it. The protector she feared had quietly become her shield. Outside, storm clouds gathered above Chicago's harbor. Rain hammered against abandoned warehouses lining dark docks. Tactical teams moved beneath the cover of night with practiced precision. No sirens announced their arrival. Only whispers. Only certainty. Damien Rousseau stepped from his vehicle with controlled purpose. Power followed him naturally. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply issued instructions with absolute confidence. The Queen would come home. His empire mobilized accordingly. Madeline sensed the shift before anyone informed her. Conversations became rushed. Guards exchanged nervous glances. Phones rang unanswered. Somewhere beyond reinforced walls, pressure mounted. War had arrived quietly. Then the suite door opened. Damien stood there. Rain clung to the shoulders of his charcoal coat. His expression revealed nothing and everything all at once. Relief crashed into Madeline so suddenly it stole her breath. Her protector had come. Heart pounding wildly, she realized she had stopped wondering whether Damien would find her. Instead she had known. Without hesitation. Without question. He crossed the room slowly. His gaze searched her face first. Checking. Confirming. Protecting. Only after assuring himself that Madeline remained unharmed did his attention shift elsewhere. Something passed through his eyes then. Cold. Decisive. A reminder that kings capable of building safe places were still rulers of dangerous empires. Madeline had spent weeks seeing Damien's patience, his restraint, his loyalty. Standing beside him now, another truth emerged. The man who made her feel safest was also capable of terrifying certainty when protecting what mattered to him. And as Damien guided her toward the waiting storm outside, Madeline understood the most frightening revelation of all. The monster had unleashed himself for her. And for the first time, she wasn't sure whether what she saw in his eyes was love or possession. Chicago welcomed them back beneath a sky fractured by thunder. Rain slid down the towering glass walls of Damien Rousseau's penthouse, transforming the city lights into blurred rivers of gold and silver. The sanctuary that had once felt impossibly safe now carried an unfamiliar tension. Security shadows moved silently through hallways. The distant hum of elevators echoed like warnings. Even the quiet libraries, once a refuge for Madeline Cross, seemed to hold their breath. Nothing had changed. Yet everything had. Madeline couldn't erase the image of Damien standing in that storm-soaked warehouse, absolute certainty radiating from him. The protector who had crossed an empire to bring her home had revealed another truth hidden beneath expensive suits and controlled restraint. Kings protected. Kings destroyed. And Damien Rousseau had never pretended to be anything else. Sleep abandoned her completely. Night after night, she wandered through marble corridors wrapped in oversized sweaters, staring through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the restless city below. Thunder rolled across Chicago's skyline while fear settled deep inside her chest. Was she truly safe? The question haunted her. She remembered Ethan's charm, his careful promises, the slow transformation of love into control. Monsters rarely introduced themselves honestly. What if Damien's protection carried its own cage? What if safety came with invisible chains? Morning rituals changed. The quiet coffee shared across polished kitchen counters became strained silences. Damien still poured her favorite roast without asking. He still maintained respectful distance. Yet an invisible wall had risen between them. Madeline noticed how often his attention followed her movements. How security details adjusted around her schedule. How updates regarding her safety crossed his desk before sunrise. Protectiveness had sharpened into vigilance. Close. Constant. Heart-pounding, she questioned whether dependence had already rooted itself too deeply within her. Because another truth frightened her equally. She missed him whenever he disappeared into meetings. She listened for the sound of his footsteps returning home. The hunted woman had begun measuring safety by one man's presence. Emotionally scarred people often mistook familiarity for love. Madeline refused to lose herself again. Across the penthouse, Damien fought a war no one witnessed. Control had always defined him. He negotiated billion-dollar alliances without hesitation. Managed empires through logic rather than emotion. Power obeyed discipline. Madeline disrupted everything. Fear entered places he thought long buried. Fear of failing. Fear of losing. Fear of becoming exactly the monster she believed him capable of being. One storm-heavy evening, silence finally fractured. "You don't trust me anymore," Damien observed quietly. Madeline stood near the rain-streaked windows overlooking Chicago. "I don't know if I should." The honesty settled heavily between them. Damien regarded her carefully before speaking. "I can protect," he admitted. Thunder echoed beyond the glass. "And I can destroy." His voice carried no pride. No apology. Only truth. "This empire exists because I make impossible choices. I know what people whisper about me, Madeline." His dark eyes held hers steadily. "They're not entirely wrong." Fear tightened around her ribs. "Then why should I stay?" The question lingered. Damien's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Because unlike the men who tried controlling you." His voice lowered into a whisper, "I know exactly what I am." His gaze softened for the briefest moment. "And every day I choose not to become worse." Something dangerous flickered beneath those words. Possessiveness. Loyalty. Need. Mine. The realization unsettled them both. Madeline feared dependence. Damien feared surrendering control. Neither understood how to bridge the growing distance. Days passed beneath sleepless nights and silent dinners. Then, while searching for a misplaced novel inside Damien's private study, Madeline discovered a confidential folder left partially unsecured inside his desk. She hesitated, then opened it. Surveillance reports. Threat assessments. Security protocols. Photographs documenting every danger connected to her existence. Page after page. Meticulous. Obsessive. Protective. Her breath caught. At the very end rested a single profile sheet bearing her full name. Madeline Cross. Below it, beneath handwritten notes written in Damien Rousseau's unmistakable script, one word stood alone. One word powerful enough to stop her heart. One word that transformed fear into something far more complicated. What? The attack began just before dawn. Chicago still slept beneath a blanket of fog and fading storm clouds when the first alarm echoed through Damien Rousseau's penthouse. The elegant sanctuary high above the city transformed within seconds. Security shadows appeared in marble corridors. Hidden communication systems awakened behind polished walls. Red emergency indicators reflected across Italian floors that had once hosted quiet breakfasts and cautious healing. Madeline Cross sat upright in bed, her heart pounding violently. For one suspended moment, fear returned exactly as it had years ago. The inability to breathe. The instinct to hide. The overwhelming urge to run. Then she remembered who she had become. She was not a victim. She became powerful. Outside her room, controlled urgency replaced panic. Staff members moved quickly through hallways while distant sirens drifted upward from the city streets below. Somewhere beyond reinforced glass, a war between empires had finally arrived at Damien's doorstep. A young housekeeper stood frozen near the corridor entrance, tears filling her frightened eyes. Madeline recognized the expression immediately. Trauma. People experiencing fear rarely needed commands. They needed grounding. She crossed the hallway instead of retreating deeper into safety. "Look at me," she whispered softly, placing both hands over the trembling woman's cold fingers. "Focus on your breathing. In through your nose. Slowly out." Around them, emergency procedures unfolded with practiced precision. Madeline anchored terrified staff members one by one. A chef shaking uncontrollably near the service elevator. An assistant unable to stop crying. A young receptionist overwhelmed by confusion. Years spent counseling traumatized survivors had prepared her for this exact moment. Fear could spread. But calm could spread too. Damien found her directing frightened employees toward protected areas within the penthouse. For the first time since they met, surprise crossed his controlled expression. "You should be in the panic room." Madeline lifted her chin. So should they. Loyalty wasn't obedience. It was choice. She had spent years surviving by prioritizing everyone else's comfort above her own. Today she chose differently. She chose courage. The penthouse around them descended into organized chaos. Broken glass scattered across marble floors after nearby impacts rattled towering windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. Emergency lights reflected across crimson warning signals. Medical teams moved equipment through luxurious hallways never designed for disaster. Damien coordinated responses with absolute focus. The king protecting his empire. The protector shielding innocent people. Yet even kings reached limits. Minutes later, as another wave of uncertainty rolled through the building, Damien faltered. Only slightly. Only briefly. Madeline noticed immediately. He remained standing. Still issuing instructions. Still controlling outcomes. But his face had lost color. His movements slowed. The realization struck her with terrifying clarity. Damien Rousseau was injured. Fear squeezed tightly around her lungs. For weeks, she'd questioned whether loving dangerous men inevitably led toward destruction. Now only one truth mattered. He needed her. Medical staff rushed him toward a secured treatment suite as emergency sirens echoed endlessly outside. Madeline followed. No one stopped her. Inside the room, chaos collided with silence. Sterile instruments covered polished counters. Blood-stained marble disrupted the penthouse's perfect elegance. Specialists worked carefully beneath bright medical lighting while Damien attempted maintaining his usual distance. His emotional armor remained firmly intact. Until his eyes found Madeline standing near the doorway. "You should leave," he said quietly. The old Madeline might have listened. The woman Ethan Mercer had tried controlling. The woman convinced her survival depended upon disappearing. That version of herself no longer existed. She crossed the room instead. "You gave me freedom," she whispered, kneeling beside him despite the uncertainty surrounding them. "I'm staying because I choose to." Heart pounding. Breath trembling. Madeline wrapped trembling fingers around his hand. Loyalty freely given. Not demanded. Not manipulated. Chosen. Something shifted inside Damien's guarded expression. Walls built through decades of discipline cracked open. Fear surfaced. Not fear of enemies. Fear of loss. "I don't know how to be what you deserve," he admitted quietly. Madeline's eyes softened. "Neither do I." Healing rarely arrived all at once. Sometimes it began through imperfect people choosing each other anyway. Outside, sirens slowly faded. Inside, silence settled between king and queen, protector and survivor. Two emotionally scarred souls learning trust. Hours later, morning sunlight filtered through fractured windows overlooking Chicago. Madeline remained exactly where she'd promised to stay. Then Damien Russo finally opened his eyes. His voice emerged rough but steady. "If you want your freedom?" he whispered, tightening his fingers around hers before releasing them completely. "You can leave." And for the first time since entering his dangerous empire, Madeline understood that love offered through choice was infinitely more terrifying than possession. Because now, the decision belonged entirely to her. Freedom arrived quietly. Not through unlocked doors or unguarded elevators, but through Damien Russo's open hand releasing hers without hesitation. Morning sunlight spilled across the fractured penthouse windows, turning broken glass into scattered diamonds over the marble floor. Chicago stretched beneath them, bruised by storm and war, yet glowing with the fragile promise of another beginning. Madeline Cross stood beside the man everyone feared and realized he had given her the one thing Ethan Mercer never had. Trust. No obligation waited in Damien's eyes. No punishment hid beneath his silence. No invisible chain tightened around her future. He had protected her, hunted for her, built shields around her, and still at the final moment he stepped back. The dangerous king of a shadowed empire offered freedom without demanding loyalty as payment. That was when Madeline finally understood the difference. Ethan had called control love. Damien called love restraint. Ethan had demanded submission. Damien offered safety and let her decide whether to stay inside it. Her heart pounded, but not from fear this time. It beat with the terrifying awareness that healing did not mean choosing a harmless life. Sometimes healing meant choosing the truth with open eyes. Damien was not gentle by nature. He was power. Danger. A man built from loyalty, war, silence, and command. But with her, he had learned to lower the weapon inside himself. Weeks became months. The penthouse changed slowly. Security remained, but it no longer felt like a cage. Staff moved without fear. The panic room became a trauma recovery suite. The quiet library turned into a planning space where Madeline helped design programs for women who had been hunted, controlled, betrayed, or emotionally broken by men who smiled in public and destroyed in private. Damien dismantled pieces of his empire quietly. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But deliberately. Money once buried in shadow accounts funded relocation programs, legal defense networks, emergency housing, private counseling, and protection teams trained to shield survivors without controlling them. Madeline refused to let the work become charity built on guilt. She shaped it into restoration. For the first time, Damien's power protected something clean. At the foundation's opening, sunrise washed over downtown Chicago in gold. Madeline stood before a small audience of survivors, advocates, doctors, and carefully screened donors. She wore a cream suit, her posture steady, her voice calm. She was not a victim. She became powerful. Damien watched from the back of the room, silent and still, no longer needing to stand at the center of every space he owned. His empire had once revolved around control. Now his world turned around one woman who had taught him that protection without freedom was only another form of captivity. Later, they shared breakfast in the penthouse kitchen while the city woke beneath them. No performance. No fear. Just coffee, sunlight, and the quiet intimacy of two emotionally scarred people learning peace slowly. Madeline reached for his hand first. Damien looked down at their joined fingers, then back at her. No claim passed his lips. No whispered mine. Yet she felt the truth between them. Not ownership. Belonging. Madeline once believed Damien Russo had rescued her from one nightmare only to become another. But monsters who choose love don't stop being dangerous. They simply decide who they're willing to destroy, to protect the place they finally call home.